أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على حبيبنا ورسولنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه العزيز: وما هو بقول شاعر قليلا ما تؤمنون ولا هو بقول كاهن قليلا ما تذكرون تنزيل من رب العالمين. وقال الله عز وجل: طه ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن تشقى إلا تذكرة لمن يخشى تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى. وقال الله عز وجل في شان حبيبه مخبرا وآمرا: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وصل عليه. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك وأزواجك يا حبيب الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. All grace and glory is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the most perfect of salutations be upon the noblest of messengers, our Master Muhammad, and blessings be upon him. Yesterday we talked about the first 3 years after the revelation began, and also we discussed the very, very intelligent plan the Prophet ﷺ put together in order to make sure that Islam be evidence for the end of time, and the foundation that the Prophet ﷺ laid in terms of making sure that he found those people who were steadfast, those people who had deep roots, those people of great morals, great values, great principles, and those people who were successful. And it was these very people who endured the tests of the Quraysh, and through the sacrifices of these people that enabled Islam to flourish and enabled the Prophet ﷺ to sustain the message, especially in Makkah and also in Medina al-Munawwara as well. So today, inshallah al-Aziz, we'll discuss the hardships the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, may Allah be pleased with them, all of the hardships they faced from the 3rd year up until the 6th year of the Prophet ﷺ's Nabuwah, the revelation when it began. So the first 3 years we discussed yesterday, so inshallah today we'll discuss the second 3 years, so up till the 6th year of the Prophet ﷺ. As I shared with you yesterday, the Prophet ﷺ didn't just go into this mission without a plan. He had a very, very intelligent plan laid out, and he went through various stages or various phases that I discussed yesterday. And the first phase was to make sure that he chose and he found those people of great character, of great resilience, of great success, and to make sure that these people would be the foundations of Islam. So the first phase was very, very important by choosing those people who were distinguished, by choosing those people who were excellent in their practical life, and those people who were successful. And the second phase we also discussed in quite a lot of detail was the protection that the Prophet ﷺ sought by inviting his family members. You remember, he invited all of his family members and those people that rejected him at that time, like Abu Lahab and even the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. At that time, they turned away from the Prophet ﷺ. But in spite of them turning away from the Prophet ﷺ, he still received their protection. His uncle did say that even though we won't follow you, and even though we don't believe in what you are saying, but because you are still our nephew, because you are still our relative, we as a tribe will still protect you, and we will not allow any harm to come to you. So he found that protection as well. So that was the second phase, to ensure the survival of Islam as well. And then the third phase we discussed as well towards the end of yesterday's lecture was the open invitation that he gave to all of the tribes, to all of the people of Makkah, and how they rejected the Prophet ﷺ's message, but they couldn't reject his character and deny the truthfulness and the veracity of the Prophet ﷺ. And so from these three stages that we discussed yesterday, you can see how beautifully the Prophet ﷺ moves from one phase to the second phase to the third phase. So it's not haphazard, it's not just something that he's thinking of and saying, okay, let's try this, and let's try this, and let's try that, and if it works, then good, and if it doesn't work, then we'll try something else. No, it's very important in your life, just like in business, in any endeavor that you embark upon, you have to plan. And if you don't plan, then you will have obstacles in your way, and you will have challenges, and if you haven't planned for them, then they will bring your downfall. So the Prophet ﷺ, the first phase, choosing those right people. Remember how he chose those people who were from different tribes. So, fair enough, you can get rid of my clan, but you're going to get rid of this clan and this clan and this clan and this clan because they are all connected to me. This is how clever the Prophet ﷺ was, by making sure that he had internal stakeholders within his family and within his tribe, and he also had external stakeholders as well. And when you have more people involved, it's very, very difficult for them to uproot who you are and your message and your industry, whatever you're trying to achieve. So this is how clever Prophet ﷺ was, and these were the very same people who were very, very successful people, successful merchants, people of great status, of great influence in their society as well. So Prophet ﷺ's first phase was very, very important, and then how he went to the second phase of providing his family, and then getting the protection, and then the third phase of the people as well. So similarly, in our lifetime, if you want to become successful, not just in your social life, in your dunyawi life, but in your religious life as well, if you want the message of Islam to spread, then you need to plan similarly. Understand your people. Understand who are the internal stakeholders and the external stakeholders, internal ones in the masjid, what's happening with the management and everything else like that, how can we make the message more effective. Work with the imams, work with the management to make sure that Islam can become stronger here internally. Then externally, go out and try to find business people, find those people of influence, of affluence, those people who are deeply rooted in their community and society, make links with them, forge links with them, so whenever anything happens, you are strong from the inside as well as the outside as well. So make sure you plan in your life, just the way that you do if you're about to go on a holiday, if you invest in particular shares or bonds or property, anything that you always look at all of these situations, and you make sure that you try to find the best people to support you, and you find the best deal for yourself, and this is what we need to do for our religion as well. And another important factor related to all of the preparation that the Prophet ﷺ is doing at this point is that he's not relying on miracles. And this is unfortunately our state. We are waiting for a miracle to happen, whether it's in the international countries abroad, or whether it's even within our homes, within our community. We're waiting for a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to suddenly transform our heart and change us and who we are and our adat and get rid of our habits, and then we can completely change just like that. But it's not going to happen. And this is the biggest point the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us, that he was there in the first 3 to 6 years, not waiting for a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He could have prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah ta'ala, change their hearts, he could have done all of these du'as and waited for a miracle, but he didn't. He used his intelligence, he used his knowledge, he used his experience, and he started to plan. And this is exactly what we lack. We want that miracle to happen, we want that silver lining, but we're not prepared to actually do something about our lives and change our state. And this is the Prophet ﷺ taking the initiative and moving towards the change that he needs in society. So make sure that all of you, especially, don't just sit at home and expect that this particular lecture is going to change you, or watching a program on TV one day is going to change you, or you meeting this particular sheikh and he's going to blow on you and do a dua for you and your life is going to change. No. You have to prepare, and for that you need to plan, for that you need to understand who you are, where you're going, what you need to achieve, what kind of people that you're going to encounter in life as well. So learn from this very, very important message of the Prophet ﷺ, of him preparing for every eventuality, leaving the success onto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but actively preparing for the triumph and the success of Islam as well. But as you know, the Prophet ﷺ prepared. And the army of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always prepares. The Muslim Ummah, they prepare as well. And naturally the enemy will always prepare as well. So now the message had spread across and all of the people of Quraysh, they knew that this is the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it was being spreading throughout, and the rumors were spreading, and so many other things were happening. So the enemies, they felt this threat, just like any other person would feel a threat as well. Whether you just open up a business today, even though he may be your best friend and you may have lived with him for 40 years of your life, just the way the Prophet ﷺ was amongst them, he was part of them and he lived with them for 40 years, but they felt that threat. They felt that threat. Why? Because it was a threat to their finances. It was a threat to the establishment of that time. It was a threat to the institutions of that time. It was a threat to the status quo of that time. All of these things were a threat. And this is why they, as the enemy, started to prepare against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there's competition in this worldly life, but this was even greater competition because they did not want to lose the finances, they did not want to lose the control that they had over the idols and they had over the Kaaba at that time as well. So the Quraysh, the people and the tribes of Quraysh at that time, the enemies and the foes of not just the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but also of Allah Almighty and the companions and of the message of Islam, they started to prepare. And the first thing that they did, and this is very important for us to learn as well, and how the approach that they used, and similarly how this approach you will find in other countries and other enemies as well. The first thing that they did was to distort the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the first thing, the thing that they tried. They attempted to distort the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then they started to ridicule the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the third thing that they did, when they realized that our distortion of his message and what he's trying to say and trying to achieve is not working, and even though we are ridiculing him, that's not working as well. Now let's go to the third stage, which is start to cause physical harm and pain to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is something that you will be well accustomed to in your life, whether it's your own family members, your own brothers and sisters, or your cousins. They will do the very, very same thing, very, very similar to this. They will, reject you and distort your message and tell other people something else that actually you've said as well. So they will distort your message and what you're trying to achieve, and they will start ridiculing you. Oh, heavy ho jayega. Oh, putte kaam kar do. Oh, seedha kaam karega. This and that. This is how they start to ridicule you and manipulate the situation. And then when they realize that even then they haven't been able to dissuade you and prevent you from your message or from your goal, then they start to cause you physical harm. Whether that's financial harm, physical harm, and all these other forms of harm. These are the things that the enemies will always employ. And this is what the Quraysh did, because it was a threat to them. So inshallah, we'll go through the various things that they employ and how they prevented the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So through distorting his message, through ridiculing him, and through causing him physical harm. But in spite of all of these things that they did, the Prophet ﷺ, this is one thing I want you to remember today from this lecture, is that in spite of all of the things that they did, the Prophet ﷺ, he patiently endured them. He didn't retaliate with violence. He didn't attack them back. No, he was patient and he endured them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he remained on his message, because the message which was pure, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give it success, will give it triumph as well. So in this dunya, even in this country, wherever you may be, the media may do so much to distort the message of Islam. They may ridicule the scholars, they may ridicule the ulama, they may ridicule even the great personality of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but remain steadfast, remain firm on the purity of your deen, on the purity of the message of Islam, and the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, وَكَلِمَةُ اللَّهِ هِيَ الْعُلْيَا. Those people who distort the message, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the previous verse mentions that their message is sufla, is the lowest of the low. But the kalimatullah, the word of Allah, the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ulya, is the highest. So always remain steadfast on what you believe, on the message of Islam, and irrespective of what people do and the methods they employ, remain on the haqq and such, the way the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, patiently endure all of these things and don't retaliate with violence, because he was rahmatan lil alameen. You can only win over people with mercy, with forgiveness, with perseverance. When somebody sees you and after 10 years of them ridiculing you and doing all of these things, then they will think twice and they think, wait a minute, after all these years he's still on this, there must be some truth to his claim. Let's go and study it. For the first 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, they may be against you just as an opponent, just as your enemy, but slowly their hearts will soften and slowly they will come to you. Why? Because you remain steadfast. So this is a core message I want you to remember, to endure patiently for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't matter they were ridiculing the Prophet or his personality. It doesn't matter, because he was doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever people may say to you on the roads, oh you Paki, oh you this, oh you that, you terrorist, forget it, ignore it, because your mission is greater, your mission is more pure for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ta'ala. So endure for the sake of Allah Almighty. So the first thing that the Quraysh did, which was distort the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what did they start to do? They started telling people, oh, he's a poet. He just makes up these poetry and he's trying to mesmerize you and he's trying to take you into a different world and it's just his fantasy and all of these things. But they say he's just a poet, he's just a sha'ir, he's just a sha'ir. Then they start saying, oh, he's a priest, he's just trying to propagate to you a different deen, a different religion, remain on the religion of your forefathers and make sure that you maintain these idols and these statues. So this is how they start to distort the message of the Prophet ﷺ by saying it's just poetry, it's just shir or shairi, he's just a priest, and then they started calling him a liar as well. And then even after that they started calling him a madman. This is what they used to say, that he's a madman, the and we say these things as well, that when somebody says something that you don't like, or that you don't want to do, you don't want to follow, these are the things that even we say and we reply to people as well. So this is the same thing that they're saying to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, the Prophet doesn't need to defend himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is revealing verses saying, وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ شَاعِرٍ قَلِيلًا مَا تُؤْمِنُونَ وَلَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ كَاهِنٍ قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Like, it's not the words of a poet. What would you know? What would you feel or understand? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ كَاهِنٍ. It's not the statement of a sorcerer, of a liar, of a magician who makes up these things. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. تَنزِيلٌ مِّن رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defends. So when people may attack you and your message, recite the Quran, endure patiently for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and know that the haqq will always triumph. It will always overcome that which is batil, because you are on the truth. So these are the things that they're doing, calling him a poet, calling him a liar, calling him a madman, calling him a preacher, and also they accuse him of being a spy. That he's working for somebody else, he's working for another king, he's working for X people, and then they want to overcome Kaaba, they want to overcome the city, and then they want to bring about their own deen as well. So all of these, look what they're saying. And imagine today, if you're trying to achieve something in your life, let's talk about your business life or anything else like that, they'll say, oh, he gets the items from the back of the lorry, he does this, he does that, he's doing that, all of these things. Why? So that they will devalue who you are and the business that you have or whatever you're trying to achieve. People do this all the time. They will attack your character, they will attack your message, they will attack every single thing that you do. Why? Because they are threatened. But you should not be threatened, because if you are a haqq, if you are on such, then you do not need to be threatened whatsoever, irrespective of what people say and what they accuse you of. So the Prophet wasn't worried, because he knew this was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is not for his own satisfaction, it was not for his own personal success, it is not for his own acquisition of wealth or power or anything else like that. Solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So people in the world may reject you, they may push you away, they may say so many things about Islam, but persevere and remain steadfast and remain firm, just the way Warqa ibn Nawfal reminded Khadijah al-Kubra before the Prophet left him after the first time he met him, said, remind him to remain firm. And this is what you need to do, remain firm in this dunya. People will say and do so many things to you and your message, but remain firm for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just the way the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. So he endured these hardships, he endured all of these things patiently, and he didn't fight back. He didn't attack them, and he didn't retaliate with violence, or he didn't start swearing at them. Somebody says something to you and then you say, I know who you are, I know who your dad was, I know what you used to do to boy, he didn't do any of these things. He didn't need to, because his message was pure. So remain patient. It's very, very easy to lose your temper. It's very, very easy to lose your patience and then start saying something in retaliation. But that's just your nafs. That's just your nafs, retaliating because it's been attacked. Your ego has been attacked. But you are doing something far greater than your ego, far greater than your nafs. You're doing it solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whatever they say, let them say it. People used to call Imam Abu Hanifa, they used to call him a Shia, they used to call Imam Shafi'i, they used to call these people Shia as well. They used to call people them Rafids, they used to call so many things, but they were haqq and such, and then they just ignored them because they remembered the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. Whenever ignorant people address you, arrogant people address you, people of no knowledge, people of no understanding, they address you, just say salam to them and walk away. Salam to them, walk away. Why? Because you know better. There's no point you doing tit for tat, because these people are ignorant. and they are arrogant, they will not see the truth at that time. So remain patient and endure whatever they say. And this is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was doing as well. So he wasn't arguing back with them. He wasn't arguing back with them. He was remaining steadfast and was remaining firm for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and remembering the verses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed unto him at that time. Remember Surah Al-Alaq, the first 5 verses of that, Surah Al-Muzammil, Surah Al-Mudassir, Surah Al-Fatiha. These are the only surahs that he had at that time. And he was connecting to the verses of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling him to rise up. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you to qum fa'anzir, to rise up and stand up, that means you remain steadfast. Khade raho, don't worry, whatever they may say, whatever they may do, whatever the winds may bring in, what they may do, remain there, stand firm for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We read these surahs and we just say, Allah ta'ala is just talking to the Prophet. But no, the Prophet understood the message, he understood this thing, and this is what we need to do when we read the Quran. Allah is saying, stand, and it means something greater than just standing physically. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, qum fa'anzir, and warn them, it means something greater than just saying, wait, There's so much more than that as well. It's similar from Fatiha and from Surah Al-Alaq. So many things that we need to learn from and we connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. So the dedication Prophet sallallahu ta'ala had was through his surahs. He understood the surahs. There was a minimum amount of surahs that were revealed to him. Like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling him that qumil layla illa qalila, that stand up in the middle of the night but have a balance as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was reminding him to remain dedicated to his worship. And we need to be dedicated to our message, to our goal, to our mission, and remain steadfast in terms of spreading the deen of Islam and the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So first they distorted the message and the Prophet persevered and remained patient. Then the second thing that they did was they ridiculed the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. So they tried to break his spirit. And this is exactly what your enemy will do, and what many people will do throughout the world. That once they've tried to manipulate the message and what you're trying to say and distort it, then they will try to break you down physically. They will attack you. So this is what they try to do. They try to break the spirit of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They try to attack him personally, and they try to hurt his pride, even though the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not have any pride, because he was doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was a man here in his early 40s. He was 43 years of age, and he was known for his honesty. He was known for his trustworthiness. He was known for all of these things, and they were trying to attack the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he didn't need to worry, because he knew he was on haqq and such as well. So if you lived a life of honesty, a life of integrity, a life of uprightness, then irrespective of what people may say and how they attack you and try to demoralize you and devalue you, you shouldn't worry, because you have done this all your life. However, if throughout your life you don't make money here and there, then when people attack you, then it will affect you. So try to make sure that you maintain a clean slate throughout your life. Always try to remain under the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so, how did they try to ridicule the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? This is what they started to do. They started to spread rumors. They started to spread rumors throughout all of Makkah at that time. And they say, oh, he's a madman, and he doesn't know what he's saying, he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's lost his marbles. These are the kind of statements that they used to spread as well. And they used to tell people that he's a crazy madman, that people used to come from Yemen, people used to come from Syria, all these places for trade. They used to tell them and warn them before they even came and entered into Makkah, oh, avoid this man, he's a madman. He doesn't know what he's saying, he's going to lead you astray, and he's going to make you lose your money and do all of these things. So this is how they try to attack the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as his personality and his character as well. And similarly, we know from the history that the stories remind us of Abu Lahab's wife. And this comes in the Quran as well. Abu Lahab's wife, her name was Jameel, and she used to gather garbage every single day. Every single day she used to gather the garbage, and she used to gather the thorns, and she used to place them deliberately in front of the doorsteps of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's house. And she didn't just do it once or twice or 3 times. She was relentless. This is how the stories describe it. That she would do it on every single day. So unlike the Tameside bin collection, which is once a week or once a fortnight, no. Every single day she would collect all the rubbish, all the garbage and all these thorns, and she would relentlessly put this in front of the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And not only would she do that, she would also provoke the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Come on, she was a lady, she was trying to provoke him to attack her and to say something to her so that she could go back and say, look, he's a madman, he's attacking a woman, I was Chari, I assume I didn't do anything, and look what he's doing. And this is what your enemies will do to you as well. They'll provoke you and do things to you, and then when you react in a negative way and in a bad way, then this gives them that ammunition, this gives them that call and say, look, this isn't what he's like. Is this what a Muslim's like? Look at how he reacts, look at how he behaves, look at how he does this and that. This is what they're waiting for. They're waiting for that kind of reaction. Prophet understood this, and he was patient. She was doing this every single day, provoking the Prophet ﷺ, but he remained patient. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he revealed this in the Quran as well. In Surah Tabbat إِذَا بِلَهَا بِمُدَبْ مَا أَغْنَ عَنْهُ مَالُهُ مَا كَسَبَ سَيَصْلَى نَارًا ذَاتَ لَهَبٍ وَامْرَأَتُهُ حَمَّالَةَ الْحَطَبِ فِي جِيدِهَا حَبْلٌ مِّن مَسَدٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the wife of Abu Lahab and how she used to carry firewood. And even though she did not used to actually carry lakra as they have in Pakistan to go for firewood and to burn, she never used to actually physically carry the firewood. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is using the metaphor that what she's doing is she's igniting all of this animosity. She's igniting all of these things in the front of the house of the Prophet ﷺ. She's trying to fuel the situation so that it explodes and goes out of control. That's why the metaphor is used of firewood. She's there, she's collecting the firewood and she's placing it in front of the house of the Prophet ﷺ. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned how that on the day of Qiyamah, and her punishment will be that she will be strangled by all of the things that she used to accumulate and place in front of the Prophet ﷺ's house. So there she is. She's igniting the situation, and more so she's inciting the Prophet ﷺ. So learn from this very, very important aspect that people will do the same to you. The enemies of Islam will do the same thing to Muslims. Your own friends and those people that you have very closely and dearly to you, when you invite them to the deen of Islam, they may do something very, very similar as well. But you must remain patient. Do not allow yourself to reach your flashpoint, where you lose yourself and you lose your control and you end up doing something which will not only harm you but will also harm the message of Islam and harm the image of Islam as well. Because he knew at this time if he would react, if he did something, then people would be pushed away from Islam. And even the companions, they would think, wait a minute, this is a personal thing Prophet has, and what's happening here. So make sure that you always remain in control of your emotions and also of your actions as well. So this is what she's doing. She's provoking and she's relentless. And she's inciting the Prophet ﷺ. And not only would she do that as well, she used to throw stones at the Prophet ﷺ. This is, come on, look at the hardships the Prophet ﷺ was facing individually. And inshallah we'll discuss the hardships of the companions as well. So how would you react today? Imagine somebody every single day coming, EDL coming, any other extremist group coming to your home and to your property, and every single day throwing the rubbish in front of your home, feasting in front of your home, all of these things in front of your home. How would you react? How patient would you be? 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, until you would do something? Physically, you would go and do something? The Prophet endured this for years on end. For years on end. The Prophet did this. Why? Because he had to show them that the message of Islam was not that of violence, was that not of aggravation, was that not of retaliation, it was that of patience and forgiveness and mercy, and try to bring people through the Prophet's character. So the Prophet ﷺ, in spite of all of this, he was remaining patient. She's throwing stones at him. The Prophet ﷺ is still remaining patient. And at one instant, she, even worse than that, she used to take the intestines of donkeys and camels and all these animals, and she used to throw that at the Prophet ﷺ as well. But the Prophet ﷺ remained patient, and look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded the patience of the Prophet ﷺ. She became blind. She became blind. This is the hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She became blind, and then she would be talking to Abu Bakr. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, she would recognize his voice, and she was there. She would be talking to Abu Bakr Siddiq, and she would say, where is that madman? Where is he? I want to say something to him, I want to do something to him. And even though the Prophet was right in front of her, but she could not harm the Prophet any longer. So if you are patient, and if you persevere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deal with them accordingly. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to take up arms. You do not need to be violent in any way or form. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect you and your honor and your izzat in a way that you can never understand or fathom as well. So remain patient. This is the lesson. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away her sight. She could no longer harm the Prophet ﷺ, even though he was directly in front of her. Well, she did further things as well. She made up a poem in which she dispraised the Prophet ﷺ, and she used to obviously use very, very vile and disgusting words in relation to the Prophet ﷺ, and she used to pay people to go into the streets of Mecca and sing these poems. sing these poems to dispraise and dishonor the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imagine today somebody doing that to your father. How would you react? Imagine you were treated like this, and how would you react? Your ego would be affected. Your own, you'd think, wait a minute, I'm not going to stand for this. I have rights, I have dignity, I have honor. The Prophet ﷺ wore all of this for the sake of Islam, because it's very, very crucial for Islam to maintain its image, which is the pure image of patience, the pure image of perseverance, the pure image of forgiveness and mercy as well. So the Prophet ﷺ, he overlooked all of these things that people did, and especially Jamil, what she did to the Prophet ﷺ, and he remained steadfast for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah will support you in a way, in a form, and in a manner that you cannot understand, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will support you and your claim, and He will support your message as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He raised the spirits of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam and the spirits of the companions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam by revealing verses and saying, I know what these people are doing, I know what they are saying, what they are doing, but don't worry, remain steadfast, remain patient, for your reward is with me, and I will reward you abundantly. So these are the verses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and the Sahaba Ikram. And similarly, the verse that was revealed at this moment in time was كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. That you are the best of nations. So rise above these situations. When people are inciting you, they are provoking you, rise above it, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse, that you are the best of nations. In order for you to be the best of nations, then you have to do something which is what? تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Order people to come to Islam and tell them this is good, and stop them and prohibit them from doing that which is bad. This is the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't react, don't retaliate, don't ignite a situation or inflame a situation further or be violent in any way. No, just do your duty and say, this is good, and don't do it. This is for your betterment. That's all you have to do. This is your duty done. So this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supporting the Prophet ﷺ and the companions of Allah. So the question that I have for all of you here today, and also myself as well, is that how have we supported the message of Islam? How have we supported the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and also the messengers, that all the sacrifices that they did and the things that they endured? How much support have we given to the message of Islam and to our deen? We don't have the patience of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and neither the patience of the Sahaba Ikram, and we don't even try to achieve a similar patience in our life as well. But it's very, very important for us that within our capacity, whatever we can do, physically, financially, through our influence, through our friends and family, we need to support the Prophet ﷺ, the message of the Prophet ﷺ. We need to support our religion by remaining patient, by persevering, and by always doing that which is according to the Quran and Sunnah, and forgiving and being merciful, and not reacting violently, and not reacting in a way that would disparage Islam and take away the purity of this message as well. So make sure you are loyal to the message of the Prophet ﷺ and all of the sacrifices that he did as well. So that's the thing that they did after distorting the message and ridiculing the Prophet ﷺ. But the onslaught, it continues. So it doesn't just stop there. Imagine all of these things happening to you, you'd probably give up. If you're living in a particular place where the people are racist and they're shouting at you and screaming at you and breaking your windows every single day, eventually after a day or a month or a year or 2 years, you'd move away. You'd move away from that particular area and you'd buy a house or a property somewhere else because you want to remove yourself from the situation. But that's not what a marad does. That's not what a real man does. A real man faces the situation and he changes the situation as to the best of his ability. The Prophet stayed there. He could have ran away. He could have done Hijrah. He could have done all of these things. But this is not what Islam teaches. Islam teaches for you, if you are on haqq and such, remain on it. Remain on it, for success will surely come to you. So the onslaught continues, and they are personally now attacking the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the way that they attacked the personality here of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that that he did not have any sons. He had daughters. He had 4 daughters of Sayyidina Khadija al-Kubra radiallahu ta'ala, and the true sons that he did have, they passed away by the hukum and command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they use this to harm the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they say, look, what message does he have? What legacy does he have? Who's going to follow in his trick? Who's going to follow in his footsteps? He has nobody, because at that time, even today, especially in our Pakistani culture, in Bangladeshi culture, even today, if somebody does not have a son in the koi varasi koni, in the koi puchana koni, there's nobody there to support him, in the key money, nobody's going to remember him. We still have that mentality today. And at that time especially, it was more potent. And they were saying, and this was something that you could have a dig at somebody and really push them that you have no son, you have no legacy, you have no heir, what are you going to do? Who's going to follow your message after you have passed away? So this is how they attack the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam message. You have nobody who's going to take care of you and who's going to take care of your message and who's going to support you. And not only attacked him, but they also attacked Sayyidah Khadija al-Kubra radiallahu ta'ala anha. They attacked her. Look at her, she's supporting a madman, she's supporting a liar, she's supporting a poet, and she can't have any more kids, and she's doing that. Imagine how you would feel. Try to envisage at this very moment somebody attacking you and saying to istara, and attacking your wife and all of these things. Why? Because they want to devalue you and they want to remove the mission that you are on and to remove you from these things. Similarly, this is what happened to us as well. It's happened to us in our community, in our society, that people have made us ashamed of our own very religion. And as a result of that, they have diluted our religion so much that when we go out whether we're in the town centre, we're on the street or anything like that, then we hide ourselves being Muslims. That we won't outwardly say Assalamu alaikum, if we might think, oh, he's going to think, what's this weirdo saying? Or is he saying go and kill that person? Then we hide our Islam. We hide our religion from people because we are afraid of how they view us, we are afraid of how they perceive us. But this is not how you should be. You should remain steadfast, you should remain pure on your deen, and not allow your identity, and not allow especially your religion to be diluted for the fear that people will think of you in a particular way, or they will attack you and your personality in a particular way. No, look at how they attack the personality, Prophet ﷺ, but he ignored it. Why? Because he's doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, you must also remember, whatever you are doing, whether it's meeting, greeting somebody, hugging somebody, shaking their hand, or saying some dua to them, or anything like that, you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't matter how people view you and what they say and how they perceive you. Forget that, ignore that, because you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now the physical attacks increase in their severity as well. And Uqba ibn Abu Ma'id, he was one of those people who did not believe in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the message of Islam. What did he do? He took off his gown and then he started twisting the gown. Just like when you wash kapre, then you twist it to get all the kapre out. So he took off his gown and he started twisting his gown from both ends, and then he made it into a rope. And he went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam whilst he was praying, and then he put it around his neck. And he started strangling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he carried. This is a physical attack that he perpetrated on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, physically strangling the Prophet alaihi wasallam whilst he was in front of the Kaaba praying towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He did so much, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam fainted due to the suffocation that he endured. This is the physical attacks that they did on the Prophet ﷺ. And then after that, in another instant, the same person, Uqba, he went and he took the intestines of a camel whilst the Prophet ﷺ was worshipping in front of the Kaaba, and he placed them all on the Prophet ﷺ whilst he was in sajda. This is what he did, how to humiliate the Prophet ﷺ, how to physically torment the Prophet ﷺ. These are the things that they did. And say the Fatima al-Zahra radiallahu ta'ala, and she comes in crying profusely, and she looks at her father, he's there in sajda, and he remains in sajda. And there she is crying, and she's taking off all that garbage, she's taking off the intestines of the camel from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and crying. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam looks at her and says, why are you crying? Are you not happy with your Lord? Whatever state that I am in, I am happy with my Lord. So he's reminding Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra that whatever filth that the world may throw at you, whatever harms that they may inflict on you, as long as you are happy with your Lord, you are doing everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then nothing should affect you. Nothing should deter you. You should remain firm on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you are trying to please Him. And whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you through the highs and the lows, doesn't matter, because you are doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he tells her, don't cry. Your Lord will support your father. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will support me, and He will support Islam, He will support the deen as well. So this is important for us to remember as well. No matter how they ridicule you, no matter what they do, what they say, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you. Know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you. And many of us forget this all the time. We just think we're on our own. We have the world against us, just me and the world, and that's it. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you, then nothing can ever affect you. Nothing can ever ever harm you. This is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to see how much you rely upon Him and how much you turn to Allah Almighty. So the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, he perseveres and he doesn't react violently. And just one thing I want to share with you here as well, on the day of Qiyamah, this hadith came to mind as well. On the day of Qiyamah, the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, when he's there standing at the Hawd, the fountain, where he'll be feeding those people who will be very, very thirsty on that very day, on the day of Qiyamah, when everybody will need to quench their thirst. The Prophet ﷺ will be standing there and be giving out that water to those people who truly believed in him, and those people who were steadfast, those people who were strong Muslims, and those people who were steadfast and remain firm in their life. However, some weak Muslims will come. And this is the hadith, I'm not making this up. Some weak Muslims will come to the Prophet ﷺ on the day of Qiyamah, when he's there at the fountain, at the house, giving out the water. And when those weak Muslims come to the Prophet ﷺ, the angels will come between the Prophet ﷺ and those people, and they will remove those weak people and they will take them away from the house. They will take them away from the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because they were weak in the dunya. They let the dunya overcome them, they let their desires overcome them, and they let the ridicule and the torment and the distortion of people overcome them, and then they allow their identity to be diluted, they allow their iman to be diluted, they allow their religion to be diluted. This weakness, due to that weakness, you will be denied the hose, you will be denied the water from the Prophet ﷺ's hand on the day of Qiyamah. So I urge you again and again, remain steadfast, remain firm in your deen, remain firm in your identity, remain firm for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, on that day when you need to quench your thirst, you may be one of those people where the angels will come between you and the Prophet ﷺ and remove you, that you will not have the hose, you will not have the water from the Prophet ﷺ's hand. So remain firm. It will be very, very difficult, but it won't be more difficult than the Prophet ﷺ and what he endured. It will not be more difficult than what the Sahaba Ikram endured. It will never be more difficult than that, because they had to set an example. And if they got through that, then we can get through all of the challenges and all of the calamities and all of the problems that we face in our dunya. Remain firm, remain steadfast for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ. And this hadith should give you that extra strength to remain firm as well. Other examples of how they physically tried to attack the Prophet ﷺ. One disbeliever, one mushrik at that time, he took the dust from the ground. As you know, it's full of dust, full of dirt, and he took the dirt and took the dust and he threw it into the face of the Prophet ﷺ. All his face was covered, his hair was covered, his entire body was covered, and then he returned home and said to Fatima ta'ala, again she's crying profusely and she's removing all the dirt, all of the dust, all of the sand from the Prophet ﷺ's face. And this is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals a verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is your aid, He is your protector, and He has raised your maqam. He has raised your maqam. Don't worry about what they do, and how they humiliate you, how they degrade you, and how they attack you. You are my messenger, and I have raised your name, and I have raised your status. So don't worry about all of these people and how they treat you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again and again is reassuring and supporting the Prophet ﷺ. And so why is it that when something bad happens to us, seemingly bad happens to us, when we are knocked down in our purpose of this dunya, then we just give up and we forget? No, turn to the Quran and you will find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking to you. You'll find the verses talking to you. You will find your strength in the Quran, and then you can go back out again and you can carry on and persevere for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another incident I want to share with you, that Uqba ibn Abu Mu'ayt, he defied the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, and the reason why he defied the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam is very crucial to understand. It's because he was a close friend, ally of Abu Jahl. And as you know, Abu Jahl was against the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam from the outset. He was against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this man, Uqba ibn Abu Mu'ayt, he was actually very, very close to embracing Islam. At one incident when Abu Jahl was out, he went for trading, he was out of the city at that time, Uqba went to the Prophet ﷺ, he was listening to the Prophet ﷺ and the message, and became this close to embracing Islam. This close to embracing Islam. But as soon as Abu Jahl returned, he found out that Uqba had been spending time with the Prophet ﷺ and said, look, I will not talk to you, I will not sit with you, I will not dine with you, I will not do anything with you until you go back and you spit in the face of the Prophet ﷺ. And then as a result, Abu Jahl and his influence on him, because he took him as a friend, he went This very man who sat in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ as well, he was inclined and this close to embracing Islam, this same man, after the influence of his friend Abu Jahl, went to the Prophet ﷺ and spat in his face. Therefore I remind you, make sure you choose your friends very, very well. Because look at him, look at how close he was. And he was about to accept the deen, but how his friend changed him, how Abu Jahl changed him and his personality. And therefore those people that you walk with, those people that you talk with, they do change your personality. You might think that I've done it, it was my decision, but no, they do influence you just the way Abu Jahl influenced him. At that very moment he said, I will not talk to you, I will not sit with you, I will not dine with you, I will not do anything with you until you make me razi. How will you make me razi? By going and spitting in the face of the Prophet ﷺ. This is what he said. This is what he said. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a verse in this incident where man on the day of Qiyamah, when man on the day of Qiyamah will say, Ya waylati, Ya waylati lam attakhiz fulan khalila, that, oh woe unto me, shame and disgust and woe unto me, I should not have taken this person as my friend. Why? Because that person kept me away from the deen, that person kept me away from the message, that person kept me away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Just like here, that man, Abu Jahl, kept this man, Uqba ibn Abu Mu'ayt, away from the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And look at how, for the rest of his life, he will burn in the fire of hell because he denied the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam and did not accept the deen of Islam. Therefore, your friends will either bring you closer to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, or you will be from those people on the day of Qiyamah saying woe unto yourself and looking at yourself in disgust and disgrace and saying, I should not take this person as my friend, as my guide, because he took me to the wrong path. So choose your friends very, very carefully. Many, many hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ about choosing your friends and that you are on the deen of your friend. That whatever the way that your friend behaves and the way that he believes and things that he does, this is how you will be influenced and this is how you will do things as well. So choosing your friends is very, very important and crucial. And it goes back to the first phase that we discussed yesterday in a lot of detail on how the Prophet ﷺ, when choosing those people who would support Islam, choosing those people who chose those of great morals, of great character, of great principle, those people who were upright, those people who were successful, those people who were honest. He chose the best of his friends that he had because they became the best of Muslims. So don't have friends just because they have a good car, or just because they have wealth, just because they have girlfriends and they have influence and they have status. No, these are the wrong things. Choose people for their character, for their akhlaq, for their tarbiyyah, for their deen, because they will bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they will take you to the halls on the day of Qiyamah as well, and you will be there with the Prophet ﷺ. Otherwise you will be from those people putting shame onto yourself and lamenting that I should not have taken this person as my friend, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, Ya waylati lam attakhiz fulan khalila, that I should not have taken this person as a friend, as a guide, because then he has led you to your own destruction. So be very, very careful. So these are the ways that the enemies attacked not only the Prophet but also the message. They distorted the message by calling him a liar, by calling him a poet, by calling him a preacher, by calling him a spy, by all of these things. They attacked the Prophet ﷺ's message. Then they attacked the Prophet ﷺ personally by ridiculing him and his personality and attacking him and his family. And then they attacked the Prophet ﷺ physically as well. So don't just think that you're going to have a life which is hunky-dory and you're going to get through life very, very easy. You're living here in the UK and that's fine. No, you will go through these challenges. You will go through all of these challenges as well in your life, and you need to understand your enemy, you need to understand all of these things and overcome them through patience, through tawakkul, through reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and remaining firm for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the title suggested today, when I mentioned that we're going to talk about the hardships of the Prophet ﷺ and the hardships of the companions as well. So I have about 5-10 minutes to discuss the hardships of the companions, but inshallah we'll try to go through them as quickly as possible. The hardships of the companions that they went through as well were absolutely immense. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who was a companion, a great companion of the Prophet ﷺ, he was extremely frail, and he was known for his frailty. He was very, very weak in his stature, in his body. He was very, very frail. And what he decided, he wanted to confront the Quraysh, and he wanted them to listen to the message of Islam. So he's a very weak man, a very, very frail man, but his heart is strong. His belief and yaqeen and certitude in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is great, it's azim. So he wants to confront the Quraysh, and he goes in front of the Kaaba and he starts reciting the Quran loudly. How many of us walk on the streets, or whenever we may be in a taxi or a train, or wherever we may be, and we are reciting the Quran, or somebody sneezes, and we're supposed to say, Yarhamukallah, after they said Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, we don't say underneath our breath why, because somebody might look at us and say, what is he saying? What language is he speaking? They might think of us that he's a weird person. But no, he's there, he's very, very strong, he believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the message that he has. So he's there in front of the Kaaba and reciting the Quran loudly and saying, look, this is the Quran, this is the Quran of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the people of Quraysh, they come and they start beating him up. He's a very, very frail man, very, very weak man. I'm sure many of you have seen our brother Hamrez. He's very, very weak. Bichara, and may Allah give him great strength and great health. But the point is, if you've seen him, you'll see how weak Brother Hamrez is. And this is similar, and I came to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud at that time. He was very, very weak, but his heart and his iman was strong. And he was there standing up to these people, and they were beating him up. Why? Because he stood up for haq, and he stood up for sight. But he didn't retaliate, because this is not the message of Islam, and this is not what the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala taught, so he did not retaliate. Another example of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, radiallahu ta'ala an. One day the Prophet ﷺ was teaching, just as he was normally teaching, and 10 people out of nowhere, 10 people from Quraysh, they came and they all attacked the Prophet ﷺ in one go. Imagine this. Try to imagine this in your mind. The 10 people against one man. 10 people were attacking the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala was walking past. He immediately jumped in. And Abu Bakr is also known for his weakness. He's also known for his frailty. So much so, in the hadith that we read and we understand that, the tumbi that we have in Pakistan, we wear a lungi, whatever we call it, a tumbi, or lungi, yeah. So he was wearing one of those, and even when he wore them and he had a knot and he tied it, it would still become loose and fall off his waist. This is how thin his waist was, and how thin he was, and how frail he was. And in spite of that, he's jumping there. Even though 10 men there are attacking the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he jumps straight in. Why? Because his heart is strong, and he needs to protect Islam, and protect the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was once described by Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala, he's described by Sayyidina Ali as the bravest of all Sahaba. This is how Sayyidina Ali describes Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. The bravest of all Sahaba was Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. So at this time, Abu Bakr jumps in, and he can see all these people are hitting the Prophet, and then he starts attacking them, not attacking them in terms of trying to get them off. The Prophet ﷺ tried to defend the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet manages to get out. But then what they do, those 10 people, they start attacking Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, and they start punching him and punching him and punching him and kicking him so much that he faints. And they only stop because those 10 people believed that they had killed Abu Bakr Siddiq. That's the only reason why they stopped. Otherwise, had he still been breathing and they still realized that he's still alive, they would have carried on. But because they assumed that he was dead, they just left him and they walked away. And then when Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala is picked up and taken to his house, as soon as he wakes up and he regains consciousness, the first thing that he asks his wife is, how is my beloved? How is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And then they say he is fine, and he doesn't believe them. He says, no, take me right now, take me right now. And immediately his own family members, they pick up Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, take him by the shoulders, and they take him to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then they show him, and when he sees the Prophet alaihi wasallam, then he is happy, then he is content, and then he says, yes, I believe that you are indeed the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How much have we been beaten for Islam? How much sacrifices have we been given? How many times have we been unconscious for the sake of Islam? How much have we protected our deen for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Look at the sacrifice that the Sahaba Ikram made to protect Islam, to nurture Islam, to allow Islam to flourish. They did not retaliate and they did not act violently. They protected Islam. We are not required to retaliate. Islam has been established for all of mankind, for all of the world. What we have to do now is defend Islam. But we can't even do that. Somebody says something and we just stay quietly, freedom of speech, let him say what he needs to say, as long as he doesn't say inside my house, it's fine. When the time needs to come, then you do need to react, but in the best of ways, by making sure that you have people in influential positions, you have people who are stakeholders in society who will stand alongside you, you have people in the media, you have people in your locality, you have people in the government, you have people in the council, you have people everywhere who will stand side by side and say, wait a minute, that's the wrong message, this is what Islam is truly about. This is what the Prophet ﷺ did. It created these great, these pockets of influences throughout all of Quraysh so that they could defend Islam, and they could defend the Prophet ﷺ as well. More other examples, we just have 5-10 minutes remaining. The great example of Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu ta'ala, and we know this example where he was abused by his master. He would be tortured by his master on a daily basis, and he would be told to renounce the deen of Islam and renounced the belief in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the scorching heat of Makkah, many of us have been to Hajj, many of us have been to Umrah. In the middle of summer, we say, badi garmi si, badi garmi si. But it was unlike that garmi, unlike that heat that Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu ta'ala saw, the one that he felt. Imagine the garmi that he felt, where his skin is bare and he's there in the middle of the summer, the middle of the day, under the sun, in the baking sun, and a stone is placed on top of his chest, and his master has his foot on top of the stone as well, and saying, leave the deen, renounce the Prophet ﷺ, swear upon the Prophet ﷺ, I swear against the Prophet ﷺ. And he says, no, I will testify that there is only one God, and I testify that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and he's his messenger. This is how he persevered. These are the hardships that he endured for the sake of Islam. Iron shields. You know, they have armor that people wear in war. Iron shields and iron armor were placed on the skin of Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu ta'ala during the hot summer days, and he still did not deny the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he endured that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And today, if somebody says to you, give money in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, volunteer into the masjid, do something for Islam, we think twice, oh, I don't have time, it's too busy. No. Where are your hardships? Where are your sacrifices? What have you done for the sake of Allah? What have you done for the sake of Islam? What sacrifices have you done for the Prophet ﷺ? Look at what they did. Look at what they endured for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. So the next time when you are asked to give your time, when you are asked to share your knowledge, when you are asked to share your experience, when you are asked to do anything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, never hesitate. Had the Sahaba Ikram, had Abu Bakr hesitated at that time, what would happen? Imagine what would happen to the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam at the 10 minutes, what they would have done. Imagine if Sayyidina Bilal had renounced the deen, and who would be the muazzin for Islam? Imagine if the Sahaba Ikram had renounced the deen, what would the state of Islam be today? They did not hesitate for 1 second, for 1 millisecond. Therefore, when the time comes and you are called to your deen, you are called to support your religion, you are called to support your masjid, to support your community, you should never hesitate and come wholeheartedly for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Just the way that they did. Another person, his name was Zubair ibn Awwam. He was just 16 years of age. Zubair ibn Awwam, radiallahu ta'ala, he was 16 years of age. And look at what his uncle would do to him. His uncle would wrap him up in kapre. Wrap him up. No, so he's not doing a Houdini trick or anything like that by wrapping him up and say, look, escape from this. No. He wrapped him up in kapre so he could not escape. And then he would hang him upside down. His own uncle. Imagine this, your own uncle doing this to you. Just because you believe in the oneness of Allah and the Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. His own uncle has wrapped him up and he's hung him upside down, and then after that he would light a fire beneath him. He would light a fire beneath his own nephew so that the fumes would go into his lungs and that he would suffocate. These are the tortures that they would do to the Sahaba Ikram. And these are the things that they endured for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And look at how they sacrificed their health, their wealth, their lives for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we can't even sacrifice 1 hour a day to come and to vacuum the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or come to do anything for the sake of Islam, for the deen. Give your life. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions and reminds us that inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mati lillahi rabbil alameen, that my life and my death, my sacrifices, my wealth, everything that I have is only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, we have wealth, but only a small portion for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have time from 24 hours a day, but we only give half an hour to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can make half an hour to the deen of Islam, and the rest is just for us. The rest is for the dunya, the rest is for our nafs, the rest is for our desires, the rest is for our family members. That's all it is for. However, all of it is under the dominion and the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who are you? You don't own your own nafs. You don't own your own body, and you're not giving it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who created you. Therefore, when the time comes, make sure that you give sacrifices for the deen of Islam. And remember the sacrifice of the Sahaba Ikram. If it was not for their sacrifices, Islam would be a completely different religion here today. So remember the sacrifices, and remember what they did. When the time comes for you as well, make sure that you do the sacrifices as well. Another example of the Sahaba Ikram, Sa'ad ibn Abu Waqqas. He was very, very dutiful to his mother. So he's a Muslim, radiallahu ta'ala, and he's very, very dutiful to his mother. However, his mother is not a Muslimah. She does not believe. So what does she do? Look at how she treats her own son. She says to him, Sa'ad ibn Waqqas, that until you deny the Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, and until you do not leave the deen of Islam, I will not eat and I will not drink. So she goes on a hunger strike. She goes, until you don't do so, she had this zid. How would you react today? When your mom would say something to you and she said, until you don't do the vacuum, I'm not going to eat for X amount of days. You give it automatically. You give it automatically. So here, Sa'd ibn Muqaz, he's been tormented by his mother that I will not drink, I will not eat, I will not do anything until you renounce the Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And she did this and she maintained this for many, many days until finally she fell ill. She fell ill and she became very, very weak as well. However, he remained steadfast because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed the verse to the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam that وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ إِحْسَانًا, that indeed we have encouraged and we have reminded and we have enforced upon all of you to make sure that you maintain the ties, you maintain the bonds towards your parents, and you always do good towards your parents, except in one situation, when they take you towards shirk. When they take you towards shirk, then you must not obey them, but in every other situation and circumstance, you must obey them. So imagine as a son, how would you feel that your mother, she has brought you into this dunya, she's taking care of you, she's in all of these things, and now she's starving because she wants you to take away the deen. This is a great test. This is a great test on you as a son, as a human being, as an individual. But in spite of that, the Sahaba Ikram, they endured this as well. Why? For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He maintained the best of ties and relationship with his mother, and he did everything that he could for her, provided food for her, shelter for her, money for her, everything for her, but he did not leave the deen of Islam for her at all whatsoever. We make concessions. We make concessions in our deen. To please our wife, we will miss namaz maghrib. To please our children, we'll go out all day and we'll miss our salah. To please another person, we'll miss our fara'id. We'll miss all of the cause of our deen to please other people. But never do that. Never make concessions when, especially it's related to the deen of Islam, especially when it's related to the hukms of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I ask you yet again, what are our sacrifices in comparison to the sacrifices of the Sahaba Ikram, in comparison to the sacrifices of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I remind you again and again, when the time does come, and you do need to sacrifice your time, your expertise, your knowledge, your wealth, whatever you may have, never hesitate. Never hesitate. It is these sacrifices that will define you. It's these sacrifices that will bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are responsible for the message just the way that Sahaba Ikram were responsible for the message. They were responsible for the message and they gave everything for the message and to protect the message and to protect the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam and the deen of Islam as well. We are responsible for this message as well. We have responsibility on our shoulders and we will be asked on the day of Qiyamah that you had wealth, you had time, you had health, you had your own children. Where did you allow them to go? Where did you spend your wealth? What did you do with your life? What did you do with your health? You will be asked about that responsibility and how you fulfill that responsibility to protect Islam, to nurture Islam, to strengthen Islam, to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to share Islam with the rest of mankind as well. We will be asked about these things. But in spite of all of these things, the enemy and their attack on Prophet ﷺ and their attacks on the Prophet and his companion, within the first 6 years, we've been discussing from the 3rd year to the 6th year, within the 6 years, we had two new good, great khushkhabris, great news, which is the uncle of the Prophet Sayyidina Hamza, may Allah be pleased with him, he accepted Islam as well, and Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala, he also accepted Islam as well. I wanted to go into detail with the life of how Sayyidina Hamza accepted, and also how Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala accepted. Unfortunately, we don't have the time, but inshallah, Aziz, tomorrow I'll do a brief summary over that and then carry on with the rest of our lecture, which is how the Prophet ﷺ now is negotiating with the people of Quraysh and try to come to an amicable solution and try to coexist. So not just break off from society, not just say, we can't work with you, try to work together and integrate into the society and develop the deen, and develop the Islam and maintain Islam as well. وَقُلْ قَوْلِي هَذَا وَأَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ لِي وَلَكُمْ جَزَاكُمُ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا. Inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow.